Nathalie Karvonen, followed by Grant Crossman. Good morning still, or it's afternoon already. Good to have you here. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to come and speak to you today and for considering these important issues for animals. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nathalie Karvonen. I'm a biologist and the executive director and founder of Toronto Wildlife Centre, which is the largest wildlife, the busiest wildlife rehabilitation centre in the country. Toronto Wildlife Centre supports much of what is outlined and recommended in the Prohibited Animals Review and much of what many of the speakers have said today, with some exceptions. We're a unique organization in that we deal with many vet clinics annually in the City of Toronto, and we do not support that all accredited veterinary hospitals receive a blanket exemption from the keeping prohibited species at their clinics, as has been the case in the past. At Toronto Wildlife Centre, we work with many of these clinics, and we know that there are some who regularly see prohibited animals brought in by their clients, animals like the IKEA monkey, and clients who are breaking the law. The vets that we have spoken to on this issue don't consider it their role to police these clients, but it would be a different story if they themselves were breaking the law. Wording for vet clinics could be modified to allow them to have in their possession only prohibited animals where the client has an exemption to keep those animals. Further, they could be engaged as watchdogs for individuals and organizations with animals of concern. We don't support the blanket exemption of prohibited animals for education programs, but would support a comprehensive and strong permitting process, as the case in other jurisdictions looked at by city staff, and is supported by your own survey findings, where 62% of respondents supported the use of some prohibited animals in school programs. A complete ban on this activity penalizes organizations doing positive, productive work along with the organizations who are not. At Toronto Wildlife Centre, we do a small number of programs where educational animals are used, animals for whom we do have educational permits from the provincial government, in our case a turtle and a snake, who are both non-releasable back to the wild. We have a close working relationship with Earth Rangers and know the quality of their programs and care for their animals is excellent. There are other organizations who also do good work educating the public, just as there are many organizations whose work is not good. To have a complete ban on these organizations, or all organizations doing this work, while allowing film companies to have prohibited animals in Toronto makes no sense to us at all. Film companies are not animal welfare organizations, and there is little oversight on the quality of life for those animals, and usually no higher educational purpose to justify the stress of using them for entertainment. Further, it makes no sense to have a complete ban on the responsible, selective use of some prohibited animals for education programs, but another example is to provide a blanket exemption for Ripley's Aquarium, who takes wild animals out of the wild, like sharks, for the purposes of entertainment. How can an animal like a shark, who has had the whole ocean as its home, ever achieve a good quality of life in captivity? While I do strongly support more controls on the use of select prohibited animals in responsible education programs, I do not agree with the rationale for an outright ban. Citing health and safety concerns, for example, for all wild animals and reptiles makes no sense to me, while allowing dogs and cats to be used in programs. I have literally seen many people's attitudes towards snakes change right in front of my eyes by them having the opportunity to see one up close and learn about the positive aspects of these unique animals. At Toronto Wildlife Centre, we get many calls each year from people who have killed snakes simply because of their absolute fear of these animals. So for us, educating people about the benefits of snakes and changing those attitudes literally saves snakes' lives each year. In contrast to that, many people are injured or even killed by dogs and cats each year. My sister and myself have been injured by even our own pet cats. I've been injured by a cat in a shelter, ended up in the hospital. My sister was hospitalized for 4 days, and I know a co-worker at Toronto Humane Society who actually died after being bitten by a cat. I'm not saying cats and dogs shouldn't be used in educational programs, but the rationale of not using, say, a small garter snake in an education program because of health concerns doesn't make sense to me in contrast. In conclusion, I ask that committee review which organizations are currently provided with blanket exemptions, like vet clinics and the film industry, where there are many problems that need to be addressed. I also ask that committee look at a permitting system for the use of prohibited animals in education programs, as other jurisdictions do. This would address organizations and behaviors which are truly problematic, while allowing positive education programs to continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Before we proceed, members of the committee, please. Before we proceed, we have two options here, maybe to extend the meeting, to finish with the depths, or we'll come back after lunch and we'll recess. So in terms of continuing the depths, we have five more depths on this item.
No, I'm sorry, I have to go, Mr. Chairman. 5 more, that's another half hour. Sorry.
Okay,
They have to limit their time. when
okay,
it's-
so we'll have to come back, and this is the last deputation that we have. Councilor Fletcher, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
Hi. I just wanted, I'm not clear your main message here, but it seems like you're supporting exotics in the city of Toronto, such as penguins or flamingos and other things, to be showcased in mobile zoos or educational purposes. Do I have that right?
Oh, definitely not. No, I would definitely, I don't think it's a black and white issue. For me, I think a permitting and regulation process, and I like the idea of a positive list, where we could look very carefully at the individual programs, make sure that there is a reason for the program, positive educational messaging, and be very, very careful about the animals who are selected in those programs and how they're used.
What I'm saying is that the proposal here is, and I know you're a big animal welfare advocate and a good partner of the city. So the proposal is that there's certain animals that would be considered exotic and not able to be displayed. You don't support that. You want to have a permitting system for certain groups to be able to display animals, like yourself or earth rangers or other. Is that what you're saying to me?
Certain animals, only certain animals, but yes, that's what I'm saying, yeah. My ideal situation would be that we could still continue with positive programs for very particular animals.
So you don't support having a list that, exotic list that can't be displayed?
Sorry, could you say that again? Someone was coughing.
Yes, I also heard that. That you don't support adding certain animals on the list of prohibited animals.
I'm fine with the suggestions for addition, but as Barry Mackay said, it doesn't actually include a lot of animals that could still be used in the City of Toronto because of the enormous amount of animals that are globally available to be brought into the city. So I'm fine, certainly with penguins and flamingos and others being added to that list.
So do you support the staff recommendation here to add certain animals on the list, and then you would not be able to exhibit any of these prohibited animals?
I do support that recommendation. The recommendation that I don't support in its entirety is a complete ban of animals being used in education programs. That is something that I would like to see instead permitted and regulated, as other jurisdictions have done, and just done very carefully and intentionally.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions? And is there any question? Okay. So I need a motion just to finish this deputant. Okay, great. Councilor Chanis, please go ahead.
Thank you. I realize, and I want to thank you for coming today. You mentioned that we need to go back to the drawing board and do a little bit more rejigging, investigating, making sure that we get it right. How many educational folks should we be reaching out to? 1, 2, 3, 5? Should we be consulting all the schools in what they think? What is your sense and what's your direction that we should follow? What are you suggesting that we should be doing?
Well, I'm a biologist. I don't have certainly expertise in what a correct sample size would be. I mean, off the top of my head, I would say, 50 to 100 teachers would be a good starting point. I would suggest, though, that also children be spoken to. Perhaps kids who have experienced some of the programs that we think are the best programs that use animals. After the fact, maybe a year or 2 years later, and say, to those kids, what did you take away from that program? How have your attitudes changed? Does it make you want to have a pet animal now, a pet wild animal? Hopefully not. I'd like to see it be more inclusive of not just teachers.
What about parents that have children with special needs? Should we be also consulting with them?
Yeah, absolutely.
On a point of order at this point is that the deputy mayor, he moved the motion to extend the timing to finish this deputation. Is all those in favor on that motion? against, carry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair, please go ahead.
So we need to go back to the drawing board. Is this what I can take away from what you're presenting to us?
I think it would be great to continue the work that's been started. I know there's been some stakeholder meetings already, so I think continuing that work and looking at these areas of concern, that would be a great idea.
Are you aware of any stakeholder meetings that might have occurred with principals, with teachers? I mean, you're involved in this file. I just read the report that came out and just spoke to my stakeholders that, you know, I keep repeating my daughters.
Yeah, you know, it's
We're not
spring
consultants.
it's spring at Toronto Wildlife Center, so I've been a little immersed under a pile of wild animals that are in crisis, so I'm not aware of all the stakeholder meetings that have taken place on this particular issue.
Would it be appropriate for us to send out an email to all the principals, the school principals, and say to them, what do you think? Please ask your teachers to contribute, ask your teachers to send back, or fill out a questionnaire?
I think that would be a good idea, and I think it would be important to be asking the teachers for feedback from the students, and again,
their parents.
what their feedback was after seeing a presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor DeBermaker. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for coming in today. And I think I'm going to follow up on Councillor Fletcher's questions just to clarify, because I think you said are you aware that our motions, if passed today, and our bylaws would allow educational programs to continue?
I am aware of that, but it would quite severely restrict them, though. It would to allow them, from what I understand, what I'm reading, a very handful of animals: dogs, cats, hamsters, only a very small list of animals. Even the reference to animals that are protected provincially and federally basically excludes pretty much every wild animal, other than pigeons, starlings, house sparrows, and Norway rats.
Isn't that a good thing?
Well, again, I think that for me, using the example of the snakes, you know, and the
Snakes
fact
are
that not wild snakes.
Not wild snakes.
Yeah. So for us, like right now, we have an education
not
snake
wild
that's a garter snake.
Right.
And we get people all the time at Toronto Wildlife Center who kill snakes out of their fear of wild snakes. And as I mentioned in my deputation, I've literally seen people's attitudes change in front of my eyes when they get to see a snake close up, not handle the snake themselves, but see somebody else handling it and learn about that snake. That fear goes away, you know, and they hopefully won't be a person that calls us because they've just killed a snake next year.
So if our staff clarified later on that garter snakes are okay for you to take out, then you're okay.
I guess in that particular case, yes, but according to your wording, we wouldn't be. So to use another example, we have a snapping turtle that's also a turtle we use in programs. Turtles are at enormous risk in Ontario, also an important group of animals to teach people about, provincially protected, but also a species at risk. Which would also in two different ways be excluded by your recommendations by the city. We do have permits from the provincial government to use that turtle in education programs.
Okay.
And again, we do see a benefit from that.
So on our prohibited list, you have no objection to us not allowing things like lemurs, kangaroos, bald eagles, foxes, boa constrictors, lynxes, things like that?
I like the idea of going through a list, as many people have suggested, and creating a positive list. I think boa constrictors are great. But I think that we'd have somebody, a working group of people, perhaps many of the people in this room today, I think should sit down and go through that list together. I like the idea of a positive list.
Okay, but in general, because there's
In general,
you're against having kangaroos in classrooms,
absolutely.
and you're against having flamingos in classrooms.
That's right.
But maybe a lemur, for example.
Maybe.
You think it's okay to have a lemur in a classroom?
It's not an animal that I've looked into because we don't work with lemurs. So I would want to look into things personally about what are the optics. Does he have to wear a leash? You know.
Okay.
So I think that, again, I think a stakeholder group who could look at animals like that would be important.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Karvonen, for your presentation.